The hardest working team in college football punched the clock at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Day one in the books for Ohio State.
That's how they do it.
It's Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. These are Snap Judgments. Football's back, baby. Bill, I know that you have the biggest smile on your face.
I was so excited because we get in here, we're waiting for practice to start, and then like the punters are the first guys out on the field, and I get juiced up for that. It was like punters and then offensive linemen. It's like they designed it just for me. It was fantastic.
You were in heaven. It wasn't even 9 o'clock yet.
No,
Punters and
great.
offensive linemen. Berm wasn't quite as thrilled.
No, I mean, I like punters. I also like offensive linemen. I think we're all like, okay, we came into this week after all of the conversation a week ago in Indianapolis, like, we're going to see Carson Hinsman at right guard. And then he was sick and wasn't here. So that changed things a little bit. But Tiger Shabola is the other guy that I think is really being considered in that spot. And by all accounts, acquitted himself nicely. Ryan Day talked quite a bit about him in his press conference. I don't think that that's a done deal by any stretch that it's Carson Hinsman or Tiger Shabola, but missed days at this point of this are never good.
They don't help.
Well, I guess we're going to jump right in.
Hell yeah, we're jumping right in.
That's
These are Snap
That's
Judgments.
it.
Let's
I was
do it.
going to talk about some practice observations, but I guess that's a good one because Ryan Day also, Bill, tell me if you noticed this. I'm sure you did. He was asked about the split squad scrimmages, which are my favorite thing to watch at Ohio State, especially when the entire first-string defense is working together.
My sarcasm detector is going off like crazy.
It is?
Yes.
Turn it off because I am being very sincere. Anyway, Ryan Day said, well, it didn't really matter that much because on the left side, we had Josh and Donnie practicing together. So that's Josh Simmons, Donovan Jackson. And on the other side, he goes, and then on the other field, we had Josh and then he caught himself and stopped.
He did. I certainly caught on to that. So they were traveling together. I think they might have spent time on either field at the tackle guard tandems. But yeah, wherever Josh Fryer went, Tiger Shabola went. Now, again, Carson Hinsman was not here to travel with them. So we don't know what that'll look like. Carson Hinsman is supposed to be back out here on Friday. We'll be here again, so we'll see. But I definitely made note of Tigger going everywhere Josh Fryer went and Donovan Jackson going everywhere that Josh Simmons went. It felt like Seth McLaughlin was with those two as well, and Josh Padilla was with Fryer and Tegra. Light on centers, too, without Carson Hinsman here. It was kind of only 2 scholarship guys. And then Luke Montgomery was snapping during like some side work with the quarterbacks, but I don't believe he did any actual teamwork with the centers. So I think Tegra's really well positioned right now. And that sort of lines up with what we thought at the end of the spring, coming out of those 15 practices and how he looked in the spring game. It would be good for Ohio State probably if Carson Hinsman comes back and is rolling and makes that a healthy competition. But, I still think the best version of Ohio State's offensive line features Tegra at right guard. He looks like you line them all up and say, like, who do you think's the best one? You immediately point at 77. That dude is gigantic and like has changed his body and I thought was moving better today. So he seems like he had a really good offseason.
He looked phenomenal.
Yeah, for Tegra, it's always just been about confidence and his own ability to believe in himself. And the more reps you get, the more opportunities you get, the more you believe in yourself. It's not a vicious circle. It's a wonderful circle. A wonderful circle of good feelings.
Circle.
Okay.
Some guys need good feelings. Some guys need to be told they're crappy. Some guys some people are motivated different. I think for a guy like Tegra, just having the chance to be out there and lining up next to the guy that's the starter at right tackle, like you start to feel like, hey, I belong here. And that's a big moment for a young guy.
Yep.
For other jobs that we consider to be competitive or undecided, that's where we saw right guard. Bill, when I was watching the defense, and the number one defense appeared to be together in virtually, 85 to 90% of the snaps, it appeared to be the starters minus a rotation with JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, and Mitchell Melton at defensive end. The rest, though, looked like it was the same throughout, and that did include Sonny Styles next to Cody Simon.
Yeah, it did. I noticed that as well. I didn't have a great look at some of the 11-on-11 stuff, but they did a 7-on-7 period for would have been 2 or 3 periods, and the one back 7 was Denzel Burke, Davis Nigmanosin, Jordan Hancock, Caleb Downs, Lathan Ransom, Cody Simon, and Sonny Styles, and like that didn't change. So that's a deviation, I suppose, from what we saw in the spring, right when CJ seemed like he was taking most, if not all, of the first team reps at will linebacker, but I think we all figured at some point that would probably be Sonny, and it seems like he's starting out camp there.
Yeah, the question is, does that remain the same tomorrow, or is this just a rotational thing? The thing about James Laurinaitis' linebacker room is that it is lacking in depth, guys that you can really feel confident in you putting out there. So I think you're going to see a ton of CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles throughout this month getting a lot of the same reps. But it's hard not to pay attention to the fact that it was Cody and Sonny 95% of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time when they had Sonny Styles and Cody Simon and Peyton Pierce out there together. So
Yeah.
you don't know. Peyton Pierce looked good for, a guy who missed all of spring with a foot issue. He looked good. If you look at like Garrett Stover, like the body change in Garrett Stover is unbelievable, really. He looks gigantic. So the young guys are coming up, but they're not really anywhere near ready to play in a meaningful snap. So it's pretty important for CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles to both be really good for Ohio State.
Yep.
Yeah, and then in terms of tight ends, I don't know. Wasn't like all of them were out there. G. Scott made a really nice play in the passing attack. There were no pads on, so we can't.
Yeah.
That's important for the tight ends to be able to block. We made that point over and over and over. But I know G. Scott made a really nice play as a receiving threat down the field. And Jelani Thurman had a nice catch in the seam from Will Howard that was later on in like a team period, or I think it might have been 7
The
on
low
7.
one where you had to like slide to catch it. That was a nice catch.
Nice play for that.
Yeah.
So a couple guys making some plays. They threw it a little bit to Patrick Gerd on the split squad stuff.
Somebody was looking because there was like a 46 out there doing Jace Middleton, tight end, walk on, was like doing some backfield stuff as a tight end. I took note of that. Yeah.
That's
Demarion Witten was with the tight ends. I mean, they seem to be doing a lot of stuff.
It was hard to figure. It was sort of the jumbled mess that we've described. Like, hey, there's a lot of people in the room, and they might all have to carve out their own role.
Yeah, like it's probably too much to say that there's clarity anywhere on day one, right? But you feel pretty good, I think, about like where right guard and where will linebacker are going, and I have no clue on time based off today. There were like a couple of guys popped at times. We won't know, and I think it's probably true about the offensive line as well, and probably linebacker, right? They don't put the pads on until next week, so like that's when guys will start to separate themselves.
Yeah, the question is, does it really matter who the starting tight end is? Because you're going to play 3 of them.
Yeah.
Pretty consistently. I mean, Ryan Day talked at media days about Chip Kelly running 3 tight end stuff. And like they're gonna find out who the top 3 are. We can all assume G. Scott and Will Kazmarek are going to be 2 of those 3, and then it goes from who's the next guy. We think it'll be Jelani Thurman, but Patrick Gerd has made himself a real player in this competition, and Bennett Christian looked good out here for a guy that missed last season. So
he also had a nice catch.
Yeah, pretty good depth developing, but again, not a lot of experience depth, which is the issue at linebacker. It's the issue at wide receiver, where today's star was Carnell Tate more than anyone else. I think.
If I had to pick like an MVP, I would pick Carnell, but I know we're all watching different stuff, so I don't know if he popped the same way.
He's in such a weird spot, but it might actually be the best thing for him to have no one talk about it.
Yeah,
because Carnell Tate is really stinking good, but all of the conversation about what you get out of a healthy Emeka Egbuka, what he means to this team. Then there's Jeremiah Smith talk, but then there's Carnell Tate, who will be on the field all the time with those 2 guys. At the 4th and 5th spot, Brandon Ennis looked good, moving.
He was out there, which is great.
Yeah,
right?
moving, running around full speed, and no slowdown. Bryson Rogers certainly, to me, looks like he's got a beat on the number 5 spot if you had to carve one out. Jaden
We'll watch
Ballard.
a little more of Milan Graham, and then we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, as of today, I'm saying that.
I think you're.
It's going to be hard for Bryson Rogers to get beat by Milan Graham unless Milan Graham just goes ape.
And he didn't like. I don't think Milan Graham.
Nothing flashy.
He just like look at him. Like, that kid looks like he's ready to roll.
But I noticed with Milan, like the first couple reps of the day today, he was out there in the split squad, and he was the only receiver getting out there and doing like mental reps, which is to me the little things that catch my eye. You got Emeka Egbuka out there lined up at wide receiver, and then 10 yards behind him, Milan Graham is doing the exact same thing, and nobody else was doing that. And I think that's a really like good sign.
I think if I had to pick a MVP, and it maybe, I don't know, too obvious or on the nose, but the guy that I thought had the best practice consistently was Denzel Burke. He got beat on one slant by Jeremiah Smith early on, and then he was kind of annoyed, you could tell. In the very next play, I think Jaden Ballard might have been in there, and he tried to run the same slant on Denzel, and Denzel jumped it and
should have picked it off.
It off. I think like got tackled but
it was a tough catch. Yeah.
He started doing that for the rest of practice throughout that. Like, all right, there was one that he got beat on, and that wasn't going to happen again. So I think in terms of showing up and what we saw, which was again not full contact football, it had to be, if you were going to learn something, it felt like it had to be more through the 7-on-7 or when they threw in team period. the secondary is just ridiculous. I mean, it just is.
It's real. It's good. Like even like when the twos were out there. So the second secondary is second secondary. Aaron Scott, Calvin Simpson Hunt outside, Jermaine Matthews at nickel, and the safeties were Malik Hartford, who's now wearing number 9, and Jaden Bonsu. Like I thought that group looked good. So like there's a lot of depth there. And if there were concerns about safety depth coming into camp, which I think probably makes sense, and it's only day one, like you just see some guys running around out there who look like they can help this team. So yeah, that secondary is ridiculous is the right word.
I thought the interesting thing was the regularity with which we saw Jermaine Matthews in the slot.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that is happening because Aaron Scott is forcing his way up on the outside. And it makes sense because if you have the opportunity, this is not a knock on Miles Lockhart or anyone else, if you can put a 6'1.5" corner there as opposed to a 5'10" corner, and they move the same, why would you not put the 6'1" guy there? That's what they decided and realized with Jordan Hancock a year ago, and that seems like a pretty good play. And now you start to see the versatility of Jermaine Matthews, who just makes himself all the more valuable for Ohio State. He seems like right now clearly the second guy in that spot, which opens the door for Aaron Scott, which is good for what I said on the podcast daily this morning, that I thought he was a guy we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
Did you guys see Lorenzo Styles?
Yeah,
out there?
he did.
Okay, all right.
He had his shoulder was in a brace. He was one of the later guys that got onto the field, but he was there.
Okay.
I know, I can sense it. Everyone's saying, well, you're giving practice observations and you have not talked about the quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
So we must.
We must. Will Howard, I think, is it too much to say like night and day change from day one of spring ball to day one of fall camp?
Didn't someone say that to you? I don't know.
Did you say night and day? I don't know. But yeah, I think we all saw it, right? Just like physically looks different. Ryan Day was talking about that. But I thought the thing that stuck out most to me was the pace, the zip on the ball. The accuracy, I think, was improved too. But there were times in the spring where Will was throwing the ball, and I thought, like, a guy that big should be able to kind of, like, mechanically sync it all up to get a little more velocity on that thing. And it seems like he has maybe figured that out right now in camp.
It looked good.
There was a lot of jokes at the beginning of June about a photo that was posted by the Ohio State social media account that had Devin Brown and Will Howard and what could only be described as like a bad body. And I point to myself in that moment.
Well, they were also wearing those
the sports bras.
And they were like cut off at the belly. Like that's not really a good look for anybody.
But,
they force it down.
I don't know. I think those guys both took it to heart because Will, just from a strictly musculature.
Strip down?
Yeah.
If you strip him down to a musculature perspective, he looks significantly different.
Yeah.
And that does impact, obviously, the velocity of the ball. And you know what also velocity impacts is accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
When you are throwing the ball in a tighter spiral and harder, generally it goes where you want it more than a ball that's floating around in the wind. Yeah. So major step up. Rotation at quarterback today was Devin Brown in the first spot, Will Howard, Julian Sayin, Lincoln Keenholz, Aaron Noland. I feel, and maybe this is the wrong time to talk about, I feel so bad for Lincoln Keenholz because I just, like, this is a guy who shouldn't have played last year, forced into duty in the Cotton Bowl, ends that game probably thinking, hey, I'm going to have a chance in spring to really compete for a starting spot at Ohio State. It's going to be me and Devin Brown. Aaron Noland's coming in, but that's not really going to happen. And then now he's fourth. And
it's Ohio State, man.
And he's a clear cut fourth. And I want to be very clear. We can go into the semantics and the psychology of why Ryan Day maybe has Devin Brown ahead of Will Howard, or maybe he thinks Devin Brown's done better. I don't know. We don't see everything.
I think to be clear, like Devin went first, but the reps were the same. I think.
But
actually, I would say there were periods where they were not the same.
And Will got more.
Because Will and Julian were on one field, and Devin was with a group of three. And again, we are really nitpicking, but technically, he would have got more reps that way. And Berman and I were watching that and be like, he said, that's an interesting way to get Will Howard and Julian saying more reps.
Yeah, I mean, it worked out that way.
Yeah.
But I mean, there is a clear delineation between those top three. And then Lincoln Keenholz, who is in the middle, and then Aaron Noland. And I know there's a lot of fans who are like very high on Aaron Noland and good. Like he's a great kid and you should root for him to succeed. But like the expectation that he's going to play a role in this quarterback room this year is not real.
I don't think it's there quite yet. I was told that
he looked a hell of a lot better.
The roster is wrong. So he's like 213-ish. he came in at like 185, so he's really changed his body.
You could see that. I mean, he looked a lot
for
better.
sure. And like he completed most of the passes that I saw him throw today. Just like a lot of checkdowns. Like I want to see him kind of cut it loose a little more because the other guys were doing that. And it's fine to be a little conservative and build, I think, some confidence in your game, but it's not going to propel you up the depth chart here. You gotta make some plays.
And the thing about Air, even as a recruit, Air's a gamer. Like Air is a guy who, when the clock is running and he's between these lines, is a much better player than he is a practice guy or what. Like that's just who he is. So we saw that in the spring game.
And this practice today was demonstrably better than anything we saw in spring.
Right, but he's still behind everyone else by a fairly considerable margin. And like Ryan Day talked about it in his press conference, like all these guys are going to go at their own pace, and people wanting to push Air along and say, well, he's got to be the guy this year. Like, don't do that. You're going to only piss yourself off because it's not going to happen this year.
Yeah. Well, day one is in the books. We got a lot more to talk about as we get ready for day two, which will be Friday in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. We'll be back for that as well. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, thinking about day one and what we might see that is different on day two when we get to the podcast daily for Friday morning. But these have been Snap Judgments, and they are in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. And that is Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. We'll talk to you tomorrow.